Hello and welcome to our YouTube premiere. My name is Dr. Will Tosh and I'm here to tell you a little bit about Romeo and Juliet in advance of our screening of the 2009 Globe production directed by Dominic Dromgoole, starring Adetomi Waidun and Ellie Kendrick. It's a production from a few years back, but the play got a name check in the news last week in our coronavirus-struck world, in a report from Verona, the setting for Shakespeare's play. It was the story of a couple falling in love while living apart in the midst of the quarantine and only seeing each other on opposite balconies. Inevitably, they're called the Romeo and Juliet of the lockdown. Now, you don't need me to tell you that Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet enjoys unimaginable cultural reach the world over. Along with Hamlet, screened 2 weeks ago, the play is unquestionably Shakespeare's best known, and his lead characters the global brand ambassadors for passionate love. But that story on the news from Verona the other day also tells us something about the way that Shakespeare's play has taken on a life of its own in the centuries since it was first written and performed by the Lord Chamberlain's men in a suburban theatre northeast of the City of London. In the past 400 years, the play has acquired the status of myth, or maybe even meme. The characters are the representatives of romantic love, quoted and parodied on everything from Valentine's Day cards to wedding invitations and t-shirts, to say nothing of emojis and GIFs. And many of the most familiar representations of Romeo and Juliet feature a balcony, a space that has taken on deep meaning for those of us today isolated in our apartments and homes or care homes. For us, for the quarantined lovers in present-day Verona, and seemingly for Juliet, the balcony is a tempting borderland between the dull security of home and the exciting but potentially dangerous possibilities of the outside world. And we like to locate Juliet's balcony in Act 2, Scene 2, when Romeo, who has seen and spoken to Juliet at the Capulet ball, breaks into Juliet's garden and spies his lover in her bedroom, and the two of them have their first love scene that ends with their promise to marry before Juliet is summoned back inside by the nurse. We can probably all imagine Romeo climbing up a trellis to Juliet's balcony, reaching up for a kiss, but remaining tantalisingly socially distant, at least until Act 2, Scene 6. Now, as it happens, the word balcony appears nowhere in Romeo and Juliet, neither in the dialogue nor stage directions. And it's possible that Shakespeare didn't even know the term. It's an Italian import, recorded in English only from 1616. Juliet appears at her window. Romeo asks, "What light through yonder window breaks?" shortly before she appears aloft, probably on a gallery above the stage like we have at the Globe today. Now, there's no indication in the text that Romeo makes an attempt to climb up to Juliet, although in the later scene he uses a rope ladder to climb down from Juliet's bedroom window. Now, this isn't a case of correcting misconceptions, and certainly not minor and unimportant ones like the presence or otherwise of a balcony. But I think it's a fascinating example of the continuing and evolving aliveness of Shakespeare's play, that one of his central scenes has acquired set design and direction in our mind's eye that's subtly different to the original text. And actually, the familiarity, even the over-familiarity, of Romeo and Juliet isn't just a consequence of Shakespeare's play. When he wrote it in the mid-1590s, the lovers were already iconic romantics. Like many of his best-known plays, Hamlet, King Lear, Henry V, Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet is a version of a previously existing story. The tale of lovers meeting across a divide of hatred is as old as folklore, and it was expanded into the story of Giulietta e Romeo by Italian humanists, and then translated into English by Arthur Brooke and William Painter, writers who flourished in the generation before Shakespeare. So why did Shakespeare have a go at a familiar story? I think the opening chorus, or prologue before Act 1, Scene 1, is probably the key to Shakespeare's thinking about the play. Now, this prologue, the one that begins "Two households, both alike in dignity," is not so much a spoiler as a revelation of the whole story. And if we had time, we could talk about the way the sonnet form of the chorus foreshadows the other love poetry in the play. And we could also explore the fact that it's only printed in the early texts of Romeo and Juliet from 1597. By the time the play was included in the first folio in 1623, the spoiler sonnet has gone, which changes the doom-laden sense of the early scenes in the play. But with the chorus setting the mood for the play, we get a story that is categorically about the grim inevitability of the lovers' tragic fate. Listen out for the language in the opening chorus. Ancient grudge, new mutiny, fatal loins, star-crossed lovers, misadventured, death-marked love. And the fact that the lovers are hurtling towards their destiny means Shakespeare can explore the irresistibility of the emotions that motivate Romeo and Juliet and the other members of their families. Love and sexual desire, certainly, but also hatred, vengeance, and ambition. And for Shakespeare and his early audiences, those overwhelming feelings or passions were all part of the same family of body-shaking, soul-disturbing intrusions that well-ordered people were supposed to control. As Friar Lawrence later tells Romeo, they stumble that run fast, and perhaps we should listen to the friar. But we'd certainly have less good drama if we did. I think what attracted Shakespeare to the well-known story of Romeo and Juliet is what has kept it alive and evolving over 4 centuries. Its central concern with the awesome dynamic power, creative, destructive, redemptive, of love. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. We're temporarily closed, but our hearts and minds are open. We don't receive any regular government subsidy at the Globe, so please donate if you can to help us continue to share Shakespeare's gift of stories in this wooden O.